Hello and welcome. This is Bill Satterwhite. I am both a lawyer and a doctor, and this is a 54-minute presentation on the topic of well-being that I recently gave to a large room filled with over 150 attorneys. My goal during that talk was to provide them with a framework for living a life of ease and well-being. My goal for you is the same. I hope that you get out of this an idea for how to make sense of life and how to live it in a way that leads you into a place of well-being. I hope you enjoy listening to it as much as I enjoyed presenting it. Thank you. So the topic is well-being. When you all contacted me and said, hey, it's kind of changed, used to be substance abuse, now we're talking about well-being. I said, great, I've been thinking a lot about well-being. And I began to think even more about it and say, well, what does that mean, actually? Like, what does that mean? The word well-being, wellness, those things, they've kind of gotten diluted out, and I'm not really sure a lot of times when someone says that what they mean. And so I just began to ponder for a while, what would it be like to just live in a state of well-being all the time? Right? I mean, for all of us, mostly it's a pursuit. Gosh, I hope I get to a place of well-being, a place of peace, a place of being at ease with life. What would it be like to be that way all the time? And then I began to think, okay, well, so what are all the things that get in the way for me with that? You know, I want to live a life of peace and ease. What are the things that create dis-ease for me? Dis-ease for me. Now, of course, in healthcare, we've stolen the word dis-ease and called it disease and aligned that just to things that go wrong with your body. But in reality, it's a holistic idea. What are the things in life that create dis-ease for me? And we are actually going to look at 6 of the things that I thought of. Frankly, it started by me thinking about myself. What are the things that have created or still create dis-ease in my life? How can I sort of remedy that? What is the cure? So that then I can get to a place of ease, right? Then I can get to a place of ease. What would it be like if every moment of every day felt like that person walking down the beach at sunrise? You go, wow, that's pretty cool. So that's our goal, for everyone to figure out how they're going to feel like that every day. So we're going to look actually at these 6 areas. We're taking them all on. Work, finances, fitness, fun, friends, family, things that can create difficulties for all of us in one way or another. So, let's start with work. When you meet someone new, what is the question they always ask you within a couple of minutes? And this is where you help me here, right? Where do you work? Good, I already queued you up with a former slide. You know work is coming, that's the answer. Work is coming. Yeah, we always ask each other where you work. Now what's interesting is, we think that's very normal, right? I mean, I do it, I've probably done it to some of you all today. I've got a friend from Germany who came over to the U.S. when he was probably 45. And at some point, he stopped me one day and he said, Bill, tell me something. Why does everyone ask you, like, what you do or where you work when you first meet them? He said, in Germany, we consider that a very private thing. Like, you don't ask somebody what they do or where they work for months of knowing them. I never had that thought before, because I'm one that's going to ask all of you what you do at the same time, right? That's what we do here. Why is that? Well, I think part of it is because we define our identity here in this country by what we do, what we have, and what people think of us. What we do, what we have, and what people think of us. That's how most of us get our identity, right? We've got industries based on all of those. Right? Think about social media up in the top corner. The whole thing is based on envy. Right? The whole thing is based on envy. I felt good about my new Toyota minivan until I saw all my friends that had like fancy Lexus and Mercedes, and then I felt terrible. Right? It's the same car. You know, I'm the same person. Why? Because that's what it's based on. And if you have any girls in middle school or high school, you know that that is a problem. Right? Because it's in those years that you get your identity from your peer group. And so you got more likes on your post, your picture, you know, than I did, right? That's what happens. So what we do, what we have, and what others think of us. Now, let's unpack that a little bit. You may be saying, oh, that's true for you, Bill. It's not true for me. I can read some of your minds. That's not true for me, you're saying. And so how do you know if part of your identity is based on something like that? Well, the best way I figured it out in my own life is to take it away and see what happens. All right, take it away and see what happens. If I wreck my minivan and never have one again, I'm not like huddled on the bed in the fetal position, wondering, who am I, right? Not at all. So I'll tell you a story about one of the ways that I began to figure out what I was basing my identity on. And I'll say up front, I would consider all three of those false identities. Those are things that aren't really who you are. Those are false identities. So when I was in ninth grade, that was when I decided I would start studying. So before that, I just kind of read over stuff and take a test or whatever. And, I didn't do all that well. My parents were not happy because I was in a private school. They're like, why are we paying so much money if you get like C's and D's? And I was like, no problem, no problem. Ninth grade is when it counts. I'll start trying. So I decided to start trying. I started doing well. Did really well in high school. Got to college. Thought I'm going to keep the same strategy. Did even better in college. Went to law school. Tricky with 100% finals. You don't really have a whole lot of, practice runs there, right? So did pretty well the first semester. Thought, okay, I'm getting the hang of this. I'm going to go. Second semester, I got a couple C's. Well, I hadn't gotten a C in a long time. And here's the thing. That actually was devastating for me. It was devastating for me. And the rest of the report card was good, but still, here are these things that were taking me back to like 7th grade. And I didn't know what to do with that. People asked me, what did you do with that? Here was my strategy, right? I said, okay, honey, when my report card comes in the mail at the end of the semester, because that's how it came in those days, when it comes in the mail, you open it, tell me if I passed, and if I did, I'd just keep going, right? I did that for the next 2 years. Had no idea what my grades were, had no idea what my class rank was. I was like, I cannot handle that. And I think part of the reason, I didn't know it then, but I know now, is because a lot of my identity was based on these three things: appearance, achievement, and approval, right? I figured out if you achieve, you get lots of approval. Not just from my parents, but from everybody. Everybody and everything. And all of a sudden, I wasn't all the way up there where I had been. And I didn't know that that's kind of how I defined myself, but I think that's actually what was going on. So I said a moment ago that things like, what you do, what you have, what people think of you are not your real identity. And you may say, okay, Bill, you have convinced me. You're such a good orator. You have convinced me in 2 minutes. So you want to know, how do you figure out what your identity really is? Right? All of us were born with sort of these innate things that get expressed, that just come out. Well, I figured the easiest way to get you to understand it, kind of a slow crowd here, is by talking about my two dogs. All right, my two dogs. Scout, the brown dog, Sam, the black dog. Sam is a Labradoodle, fancy custom-made dog. Scout is a mutt. We picked him up at the pound. We did DNA testing on him. The number one thing is like mix. The number two thing was hound dog, though. He was some kind of hound dog, right? Well, so here's the interesting thing. People, like the black dog, would retrieve stuff, and people often said, how did you teach him to retrieve? How did you do that? I'd love to teach my dog how to do that. I said, I threw the ball out there, and he would go get it and bring it back. I said, that's it. That was my whole instruction. I threw the ball out, he would go get it and come back. He particularly loved to do that in the water, right? He would do it in the water for hours. I'd be like, Sam, I'm exhausted. I'm so tired of throwing this thing out. He didn't care. He was going to jump in, go get it, and swim back. The brown dog, on the other hand, had a different strategy. He was not a great swimmer. He could swim. Initially, he would jump in, but he didn't have web feet. He couldn't swim that fast. He would never get to the little floating buoy. So finally, he decided, I'm away at the top of the ramp, and when the dog comes up with it, I'm stealing it from him. And that was his plan, right? That was his plan. And I will tell you, he could smell like crazy, though. I would let him out in the morning, and he would literally stand at the top step on the back porch, and he would smell the air in every direction. He would just be like, and he was figuring out what had happened last night, right? What kind of critters had walked through there. Sam couldn't smell anything. You could drop, a burger on the floor, and he wouldn't know where it was. Scout got the burgers. Okay, so what does that have to do with us? And what does that have to do with identity? And here's one of these key points I really want you to take home. Doing actually comes out of being. So for Sam the Labradoodle, why did he go retrieve? Well, just because that's how he was wired up. That's just what he did. It didn't matter the setting. He was going to be that way. All right, the same is true for us as people. We are born with certain identities, things we do really well, that are the core of who we are. It is not, what grade you get in law school or anywhere. It is not actually what your title is in a law firm. It is not the house you live in or the car you drive or what anybody else thinks of you. That is not your identity. That is not who you are. Now, according to the professional ethics, there is sort of an express professional identity, but what I would say about that is that actually comes out of your true identity, who you really, really are. And that's going to get expressed in every setting. So here are just some thoughts on what those things can be like. You can be a builder. I don't mean of like buildings, although you could do that. But you could be one who says, I am great at starting programs and turning them into something, right? That person's kind of a builder. They know what to do, right? They can do that. You could be somebody who says, I love solving puzzles. It doesn't matter whether it's one on my kitchen table or whether it's a trial matter or whether it's, a medical mystery. I just like to do that. I'm just good at that, right? So it doesn't matter the context. Who you are will just sprout up no matter what. For me, I'm more in this second column, that of being a teacher and a coach for people. Every single profession, every single job, I sort of wander into those things and say yes. Why? Well, because I'm like Sam the Labradoodle. You just throw it out there and I'll go get it, right? Same for some of these others. And you indeed can come up with your own. And what I would love to have is for you to recognize that your doing, again, it doesn't matter what your particular type of law is or anything else, is going to come out of who you are. It's going to come out of who you are. So these would be your points of reflection. That's sort of your weekend homework, is to think about, what is my true identity? Who am I really, really under it all? If we had a rule in here that you can't ask anyone what they do for the next 30 days, what would people say you are, right? Who are you? What would they see in you? And so one way to do it is ask your friends. You can ask your friends. They'll tell you what you're really good at, right? They'll just say, you're great at this, right? You always make me laugh. Or, got a friend whose daughter is a fabulous artist. Fabulous artist. I mean, she painted pictures of those two dogs that were just like caught their personalities. I was like, I need to pay you $200. This must have taken forever. She said, no, it took about 30 minutes. She said, anybody can do that. I said, no, they can't, actually. I can't draw like stick dogs, And you're doing this. And she's like, no, it's a big deal. Now, why am I saying that? Because often others recognize our gifts and talents and who we really are, and not us. Because it comes so easily to us, right? If my dog could talk, he would not say, I'm a great retriever. He'd say, well, of course, you just jump in and go get it, right? So it's the same for people. You might need help in knowing that. Okay, second area. Let's talk about money. Always a favorite topic, right? Everyone's favorite topic. And how do we go from, whoops, I'm a little too fast. How do we go from what is often a topic of great dis-ease for all of us, again, do you have enough? Is it going to last? What's happening, right? To a place of ease as it relates to finance, to a mindset of abundancy, not scarcity. Because in America, again, these people are held up as idols, right? Those three men are all billionaires. I was reading that one of them's probably going to become a trillionaire. Who will be the first one? A trillionaire. You're like, what do you do with $1 trillion? Like, there's no bank you can put that in, right? There's nowhere to go. So, one of the things that I want you to remember is that things like being rich are a relative term. That is a relative term, being rich. Who's rich and who's not rich? And I'll tell you how I know this. I did extensive, exhaustive research on this very topic with a bunch of elementary school kids for a children's sermon. So I was going to give a children's sermon at church, and candidly, I don't remember what that was about, the sermon or anything, but what I remember was the illustration, because it makes the point. When I sat down, I had a paper bag. Inside the paper bag were these fun-sized Snickers bars. And so I started giving them to each kid. And I say, oh, do you like this? Yeah, this is great. Are you happy and satisfied? Yes, this is the best. I mean, who goes to church and gets handed candy, right? That's like Halloween church. So we, pass it out, right? And then for the last kid, I gave him a giant Snickers. What did all the other kids do? Oh, man, why did she get the giant Snickers? I just got this little one. Like, what is the deal? Right? Why? We do the same thing, right? We do the same thing. All the time. I surprised my wife, and you can see that we were on the poverty plan, having changed careers. I surprised my wife one time with a brand new Honda Civic for her birthday. She'd never gotten anything like that. And then I realized that everyone else was giving their wife like a Lexus or a Mercedes or whatever. And I was like, yeah, it's just a crappy old Civic, but whatever. She loved it, right? Same deal. Same deal. Our Snickers bars are just different. Think about that in your own life. Think about that for sure. So a couple of take-home points on this. The first is that we actually have to recognize that our money is not about us. You'd be surprised at how that changes your outlook. If you say, this is awesome, I'm making a lot of money as an attorney. How do I use that for the growth and enrichment of this community where I live? Yes, you need money for yourself. Yes, you need a house and a car and clothing and whatever. Yeah, all that. But many of us have more than that, right? What is it like to then have an abundance mindset and begin to share that? That moves you down a path of well-being, believe it or not, as I'll tell you in a second. The other thing I like to think about is one of the other names for money is currency. Just like the current of a river, it's designed to move. So if I win the lottery and say, great, I have $1 million in cash, I'm going to build like a Fort Knox garage in the backyard and just keep all that money right there. That does no good. Doesn't do me any good. Doesn't do anybody else any good. Money is designed to move, and we need to make that happen. Here's the other thing that's really crazy. People who give away money actually feel like they have more of it. Same is true for time. If you take super busy people, right, who work all the time, and they decide they're going to do some volunteer work once a month, for 2 hours at the soup kitchen, they think they have more time than people who don't do that. Now, time didn't get any bigger. It just changed their mindset about it. So think about that. If the more you give away, the wealthier you will actually feel. And the importance of things like all of this is those are things that do feed your professional identity. What are your values? What are your core principles? What are you really sort of made of and based on? This idea of wealth actually came home to me fairly recently. A handful of years ago, my mother-in-law died, and so it was a big funeral and lots of people there. And so one of the people there was actually someone who had been in law school with my father-in-law. They had kept in touch, and this guy comes down, and so he didn't know anybody. So he and I were talking, and he asked me what I do, right? Standard first question. And at some point he asked, well, do you have any family? And I began to say, oh, yeah, I got 4 kids, and we got a couple grandchildren. And at some point, he stopped me, and he literally grabs me by the shoulders, and he looks deep in my eyes, and he says, Bill, you are a very wealthy man. And so I think about that. Whenever I feel like I don't make as much as you, or am I going to have enough money to retire? Why did I have so many children? They cost a lot, even still. And now they have lots themselves, and they cost a lot, right? And then I just look at that picture. And I just say, I'm a wealthy man, right? I'm a wealthy man. So here's the point of that. How do you define what being wealthy is? It's a subjective term. You get to define it. Nobody else can do that for you. Nobody else. And it's something important that you should do. Why? Because it helps you set your priorities as you go through life. Otherwise, you are going to end up on your deathbed as the only person ever who has said, I wish I spent more time at the office, right? Nobody says that. They say the things that matter to them. That's actually what makes you wealthy. You have to engage in those things. All right, let's talk about fitness. So most of the time when you say fitness, people think of physical fitness. People think we're going to talk about going to the gym and all the things you should do. Physical fitness is part of it, but I tend to think of it differently. I think of it much more broadly. This idea of fit for duty. And frankly, this idea came to me because I kept trying to figure out, what state of physical health do I need to be in? And what for? I'm not running marathons. I'm not playing full court basketball. I'm not doing all these things I used to do. So how fit do I need to be? And what for? I kept asking myself that question. And so all of you need to ask yourself the same question. What do you actually need to be in shape for? All right? That's a key part of your well-being. And from my perspective, nobody else can define that for you. And to me, it's an inclusive term that really says, what do I need to be fit for in my body, in my mind, in my soul, in my spirit? Because that's all part of being a whole human being. And if you want to be one that's well, then you have to think about all those things. I couldn't decide what a good word was to describe that, so candidly, actually made one up. Healthability. Healthability became my word. What is the health I need to have so that I have the ability to do the things that I have to do, that I want to do, that I'm called to do? That's the kind of health I need to have. That's the kind of overall body, mind, spirit conditioning that I need to have to actually be at the highest place of well-being, at the best place of ease throughout my life, because I know what I'm doing, why I'm here, and I'm doing all of that with preparation in all of those areas. So, because that's kind of hard to grab, let's talk about one of the longest running basketball players ever, LeBron James. He's played for a long time. Of course, it helps if you start when you're like 12 in the NBA. But anyway, what was he, 17, 18, 19? I can't remember, but he started early. And he does all the usual stuff that everyone else does to stay physically fit, right? So this part of what I'm saying is really just using this as an example, physical fitness. But here's the other thing he does that not many people do. He travels with all these people. A nutritionist, a chiropractor, a massage therapist, a physical trainer, all these people. Why? Because every time he takes the court, he wants to be completely fit for the duty he has of playing in this game. He doesn't want his muscles to hurt, his tendons to hurt, everything's loose, everything's limber, everything's strong, and he's willing to do all that to make that work. So he's hardly ever been injured. He's still playing after, goodness knows how many years. So, what is it as an attorney that you need to think about on the same level and in the same way as LeBron James? Right? What part of you? You're not going to dunk a basketball. I looked over the crowd. I think it's very unlikely. All right? So here's what I think. If I'm going to hire one of you, this is what I want to be fit, your brain. I'm hiring your brain. It happens to come in a body, right? That's why I'm going to engage you. That's why I'm going to engage you. So you need to be thinking, what do I need to do to have that particular piece of me be very fit? All right? Now, anybody know what that is? Periodic table. Let me guess, you're an IP lawyer. Law student, okay, but you're thinking about IP, right? Yeah, you were a chemist, right? The only people I know who ever know this in law are people that go into intellectual property because, it echoes that. Why? Because, again, their doing comes out of their being. They love that kind of stuff. That's how they think. And so whether they're, a chemist professor or an attorney, they all go down that path, everyone that I know. There are no IP history majors that I know of. Okay, So why does that matter? Well, because guess what? Your brain needs a bunch of those if it's going to function at its highest level. I mean, who knew your brain needed copper and selenium and manganese? Like, what are those, right? Who knows? That's what you need, actually, if you are actually going to perform at the top of your ability. And that's not all you need. You actually need these macronutrients. Those right there, if you're going to have these other things inside your brain. Serotonin makes you happy, right? Dopamine and norepinephrine, those make you concentrate. I would love it if I hire you if you know how to concentrate, like really well, right? Really, really well. That would be great. And there's more, actually. Here's some other nutrients that are critical for your brain to function at its best. What would it look like for you to be intentional about saying, I need my brain to have this level of fitness all the time, and I'm going to apply that same thought pattern to every area, of my body as well, and my soul and my spirit too. What does that look like? Right? What does that look like? Now, back to this, if you're thinking, am I supposed to go out and buy a bunch of vitamins and take them every day? You can. I'm not selling any. You can, but you also can just eat food like this, right? It's packed with all that stuff. Now, you'll notice there is no burger and fries on there, right? There is no sub sandwich on there. But those are the things one would eat if you were as serious about your brain as LeBron James is about his body. That's what you would go for. Because that way you're running, finely tuned, top speed. This is easy. The other thing your brain's going to need is something called sleep. Anyone ever heard of sleep? Oh, we need a definition of sleep, right? And so lots of medical journals are filled with the fact that if you really are going to do your best work, you should sleep 7 to 8 hours a night. How about that? Now, I will say, when I talk to doctors and lawyers, all of them quickly acknowledge, well, that research is based on regular human beings. We, however, are super human beings. We don't actually need that. We have special powers. We're almost super beings, right? I remember being at a conference where there was another speaker talking about how one of the professional tennis players slept 10 hours a night. And I joked, I piped up and said, no, he said he sleeps 10 hours. And I piped up and said, over how many nights, right? Because I was like, nobody sleeps 10 hours in medicine. Nobody sleeps 10 hours a night. They'd think you were sick. But that's what these people do. Now, why does that matter? Here's the deal. If you get less than 6 hours sleep a night, here's what you cut out. You cut out the first 2 deep sleep cycles, which means you have trouble consolidating knowledge from what you learned and did in the day to nighttime. That's when that happens. So if you don't get that sleep, you are not moving stuff from your RAM drive to your hard drive. You're just not as well as other people. So again, if I'm going to hire you, I actually want you to remember what we talked about today and what you did today and have that sink in. So think about that. And that's certainly hard in a culture like this because, life and time is counted in minutes. And where's it going? And everyone tracks that. And that's what your worth or your identity is based on in a law firm, right? Where do you fall on the monthly publication of billable hours? Oh, great, right? We live in professions that glorify being tired. And in fact, that's actually what Brene Brown said recently, that, if we're serious about living a wholehearted life, about being in a place of well-being, we've got to create a culture where things like sleep and play are okay. We basically idolize exhaustion. Again, I've now been in 2 professions where you idolize exhaustion. You stay up all night and write the brief, everyone's like, yes, way to go, right? You stay up all night admitting patients, that's awesome, right? I mean, we're kind of in a suck-it-up profession and keep going. That's what you do. Maybe that's not the best thing to do. Maybe not. So, let's actually think about play. Whoops, no, let's reflect some. These are your reflection homework points. And they're all in the handout, so you're good. What do you need to be fit for? You know, one of the things that made me start thinking about this happened actually like 7 years ago when we kept our first grandchild for the weekend. And he was this big old baby, and he's 6 months old, and the parents went off to like celebrate, you know, finally a night away. And by the time they got back, my arms were like shaking because I'd been carrying this big old guy all the time. And I thought, when I lay in bed, what is wrong with me? I turned to my wife and I said, does having grandchildren make you old? Or does it just show me how much older I've gotten? I mean, I used to be able to carry a kid on each hip, like for blocks and blocks and blocks, and here I am changing arms all the time. That's what happens, right? I knew that I needed now to be fit to be a good grandfather. I do want to hold my kids. I do want to be able to carry them to the park and back. And so I said, I got to start like working out with my arms, not because I'm trying to look buff for the beach, but because I need to carry them. That's part of fit for duty. That's in my lane right now, right? So what is in your lane? What are those things that you ought to make a list of and say, okay, these are the areas I really want to shine. These are the places I want to be, the categories like LeBron James thinks about for his body. Now we'll shift to play. We'll shift to fun and play. And so when we think about fun, what I want you to do is write down, there's papers on there, or you can write it on a napkin. Come on, there are pens, everyone, you got to come. The teacher is saying, pull out a piece of paper, all right? Write down 3 things you did for fun. And this is going to be whatever pops into your head. You got 10 seconds. No using AI here. What did I do for fun? What do people do for fun? That's what you're going to Google, right? All right. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. That's good. Okay, now let's go fast forward. Write down 3 things you do for fun now. What are things you do for fun? All right, 5 more seconds. Okay, true confession. When I did this little test on myself, the second question was hard. Way harder than the first. And the first has been a long time ago, but it was a lot easier. This was way hard. I kept thinking, what do I do for fun? Do I have any fun? Is my life no fun? Like, nobody answered that, okay? Is my life no fun? I mean, I'm thinking these things. What do I do? Why? Because, you know, clearly one's a bit pathologic to go all the way through law school and do all that and start all over again and do all the stuff to be a doctor, right? You emerge on the other side, that's not normal, right? That means you're almost by definition not normal. Not superhuman, just not normal. And so I really had to think about that because a lot of my fun in the past was based on, you know, playing sports and doing physical things and all that. And then, you know, sure enough, there I am in med school with 3 kids in residency. We had a 4th, and then working and dealing with them and all that. I'm like, there's no margin. Like, what is fun? You know? Eating a peppermint patty at night before I go to bed, I guess that's my fun for the day. That was it. It was short. So it's important to think about that. And so I did that kind of homework for myself, and I said, you know, what do I actually do for fun? I didn't ask my wife because she would have said nothing. So I decided that, actually before I spill that, what I want to do is have us think about play. So fun is basically based on play, and you need to know what play is. And here is one of the definitions of play. The classic definition of play is it's spontaneous, it's voluntary, all right? So if you sign your kid up for something they don't want to do, that's not voluntary. It's voluntary, it's enjoyable, so if you or your child is crying or angry on the sidelines, that's not play either, right? That's not play. If they're crying, that's not play. It's apparently purposeless. This is often a hard one for us to meet as adults. I mean, one time I ran into a guy who said, oh yeah, I started something new. What is it? Oh, I'm playing pickleball. I said, that's great, tell me about it. Well, I'm really practicing a couple times a week because I'm trying to be number 1 in the state in my age group. I'm like, is that play? or does that have a purpose? Like, that's just a new way of work, right? That's just a new way of work. That's all that is. I mean, when I exercise now, sometimes I'll ride a bike or I'll swim and, occasionally try to jog. And one of my family members was like, well, how far did you swim? What was your time? I'm like, time out. I am measured in every area of life right now. This is not going to be one of them. I swim until I get tired. If I'm tired in 10 minutes, I'm done. If I'm tired in 30 minutes, that's fine. It doesn't matter. I'm not counting anything. I'm just doing it to do it, right? And so apparently purposeless, that is huge as an adult. Done for its own sake, basically becomes a state of mind. So for me, I said, what are the things that I do for fun? Well, I took a painting class one time. My painting was so good that I decided I would donate it to the people who clean my hotel room because I knew that it was going to be a Van Gogh and I wanted them to have it. So painting, playing with grandchildren, playing with kids is great. They pull you into the present. They don't care what you did yesterday. They don't care who you are. They don't care where you work. They don't ask you where you work. You're just doing something stupid with them, right? And you get into it. Reading lots of books. I got better at reading books when I realized I did not have to read the whole book. This is not for a class, right? If it's poorly written, I put it down. If I've already gotten all I need out of it, I put it down. Some I read twice. It doesn't matter, right? It's just for fun. It's just for fun. There's no grade. Dress-up party at work. We have this big leaders meeting. The last thing is a costume party. This year it was a Western theme, and 3 of us unknowingly ordered the same Western costume off of Amazon. And we said, hey, that looks familiar, right? Then doing stuff with friends, hiking, whatever. That's my definition of play now. What is your definition of play? It's really important. These are all the things that come from play. We have the word recreation. Really, if you break it down, it's recreation. You are getting sort of restored and recreated life when you do play. That's going nowhere. It doesn't matter what it is, right? It boosts things like problem solving. Again, if I'm hiring you, I would like for you to have a high level of problem solving. A lot of times you're getting hired because there's a problem. So, make that high. Executive functioning. This is fascinating. I'll flip into pediatrics for a minute. When people have studied kids and said, which kids seem to have the best executive functioning? You know what's highly correlated with that? How much free, unstructured play did they do as a child? And I think about that with sadness because we have structured play so much for children now. We basically taken adult rules and pushed it all down. I mean, you can start sports at 3. I'm like, oh my gosh, parents come in, I think my child has ADHD. He doesn't pay attention. How old is he? 3. I'm like, his attention span is like 3 seconds. Like So, executive functioning, more play, and a few other things. Improving focus, that's always a good idea. Stimulating the brain. So again, part of your reflection homework is to say, what do you do for fun? What do you do for fun? All right, now let's shift to something that's super important. This has to do with friends. I truly believe if you're going to live a life of ease and well-being, friends are really important. And we'll walk through that. Lots of people spend their whole career studying friendships and social interaction and all that. So this is the Bill Satterwhite version, which is, I think of friends kind of in a couple categories. One are what I call transactional friends. And I don't say that in a bad way. I just say it in a way that it is, which is these are people that, hand me the coffee at Starbucks. Do you want the usual, right? Believe it or not, studies show that's an important transaction. People who have more of those, they actually have a more elevated mood. So I'm not denigrating that. They might be colleagues at work. They might be people I do stuff with. I know that you're married and you have kids, but I have no idea what their names are. That's okay. This is the context, all right? Then there's another category, which I call proximity friends. These are people that just happen to be near you. So you're friends with all your neighbors, but you move 2 streets over, and what happens? Most of the time, you don't do anything with them anymore, right? There might be 1 out of 10. Why? Well, that's okay. You're just proximity friends. Same at work. In fact, people have studied work, and everybody's got these work cubicles now in these big spaces like this. They figured out if you're more than 200 feet away, someone you were close to sitting beside and did lots with, if they go further than that, you won't do anything with them again. They're a 200-foot friend. That's it. Okay. Then there are relational friends. So generally speaking, we can have somewhere between 50 and 150 of those people. People we sort of know well. We do know their kids' names, but there's a lot of depth to that. 10 or 15 that are much closer, and then a handful that are really, really close. And that's pretty much it. If someone says, oh, I got 400 friends, you're like, no, you have a lot of friends on Facebook. Those aren't real, right? That's not real. These would be real. That's how I would think of that. So why is this so important? Well, it is critical if you want to go from a place of dis-ease in life to a place of ease. And we're going to talk about this Harvard study of men to prove the point. So this began almost 100 years ago. They were studying the men at Harvard. Do you know why they weren't studying the women at Harvard? Because there weren't any, right? It was basically a bunch of old white guys. Well, they were young white guys then, but now it's much diversified, and so the study has grown. But their point was to say, what predicts how people age? Like, what is that? We're just going to follow them. And so they started asking questions every year of this crowd. And it was stuff you would expect. What's your BMI? What's your weight? Do you smoke? What's your cholesterol? Blah, blah, blah. All those things. But they asked more. Truly, they ask them 1,000 questions a year. I'm thinking, how long does that take? I mean, people from Harvard are important, right? They're not going to spend all that time. Anyway, they do. So, do you know what the number one question was that predicted how long a man would live? Who wants to take a guess? Don't read ahead. I'm watching all your eyes right now, seeing who's looking down.
How many close friends they have?
How many close friends they have? Yeah, that's essentially in the ballpark. Here's what it was. Do you have someone to call if you had an emergency in the middle of the night? That was it. If they said no, they were going to die a lot earlier than people that said yes. So, here is my homework for you. Who are your 3 a.m. friends? Who are your 3 a.m. friends? When I first read about this about a decade ago, I was like, I'm not sure I have a short list of 3 a.m. friends. I mean, I got a lot of friends, a lot of people I know, we do stuff, whatever. Do I have people that would drop everything at 3 a.m. and come help me? And so I began to get intentional about that, saying, tell my wife, I need some 3 a.m. friends, right? This is a mission. Yeah, you might be gone when I need help at 3 a.m., right? And so that's something I want to encourage all of you to do. You will have a much richer, much more fun life if you can do that. Okay, in the time that's left, we're going to take on the last topic. Now, it's pretty simple why this topic is last, right? Because it's the hardest. We get to pick our friends. I didn't pick my brother and sister. They just were there, right? They were there. Same for parents, same for my own children. I actually didn't pick them either. They just appeared one day. So that happens to all of us. And so family of origin can be a great source of dis-ease because you're together all the time, you bump into each other a lot. And so, whether your family looks like this or like mine or like something else, it doesn't really matter. That happens simply because we're human. If you're human, I'm like, yeah, you bump into each other, So these are always worthwhile things to think about. What was it like when you were growing up? Was that a joyful setting or a difficult setting? What percentage of time was it each? What did people say about you when you were a little kid? Did they say, oh, God, Bill, you're such a pain in the butt. Why did we ever have you? Or did they say, man, you're just delightful and fun, right? We love having you around. Yeah, you do screwy stuff sometimes, but it's still fun, right? What was that like? What did they say? So how do we get to a place of ease and well-being inside us with issues surrounding family of origin? Well, a couple of my friends, when I was bouncing this idea on them, they said, oh yeah, I got a strategy. I said, what's that? One of them said, I just cut them off. That was a strategy. She's like, yeah, I had an argument with my brother. I hadn't talked to him in 10 years. I'm like, well, that is a strategy. Right? Another, this was a creative idea. He said, I realized, once I left the house that when I would come back for like Thanksgiving dinner, we'd just pick up where we left off. There were all kinds of comments and criticisms and stuff, and it was just so hard. And then another time, I went to my friend's house for Thanksgiving, And I had a great time. Like nothing they said bothered me. It didn't matter. I had the time of my life. And I realized if I could just pretend my own family was somebody else's family, it would go a lot better. So that was his strategy, right? And I mean, those are okay. Those are all coping strategies. Those are okay. You can start there. But before I give you the real answer, let's flip into lawyer mode, right? Everyone knows forgiveness of indebtedness, right? That's a concept you learn at some point as you make your way through law school, forgiveness of indebtedness. And of course, we know what that means, but I'm going to talk it out loud, right? So if I loan you $100,000 and you, for whatever reason, good reason, bad reason, no reason at all, you don't pay it back, right? You are indebted to me. And I can pursue you, I'll probably hire a nice lawyer to send you letters, and then we might try to, foreclose on something, get a judgment, the process, right? Now I also can forgive that debt. Because see, as long as you owe me, now I am actually engaged with you over and over and over again. And I may be angry with you, you have done me wrong, there's some sort of injustice I have suffered, but we are still tangled up, right? So we can go through a legal process and forgive that indebtedness, and I get to kind of push your boat off to sea. And I was like, yeah, they did me wrong, but that's that, right? Forgiveness of indebtedness. So how does that translate into our lives? Oh, let me tell you this is an important point. The idea of forgiveness of indebtedness, of course, is you owe me nothing, right? That's really what you're doing. You are canceling the debt, saying you owe me nothing. So let's apply that to people. All right? My own experience, and research back this up, is the best path to well-being with your family is by forgiving the things that they have done that have somehow hurt you, in your opinion. Somehow hurt you, all right? Unforgiveness keeps you tied to that person. It's just like these people who were tethered together, okay? They were doing a weird experiment of staying tied to each other for a whole year. That's a different story for another talk. But it made a great picture, right? Because that's what happens if you do something to me where truly I may have been injured by you. It's unjustifiable, it's unjust, it's inappropriate, it's wrong. Something you said or did or failed to say or do, right? So I'm not saying that's not there. It is there. But as long as I am bitter and resentful, I am still tied to you. I cannot live a life of peace and ease and well-being if that is true. And my own experience is that also bubbles over into your professional identity. Because you're always like, why is Bill so angry all the time, right? Well, it's probably something like that. Probably something like that. There's a thing behind the thing there. So, why is forgiveness so important? Well, forgiveness actually cuts that tie that is binding you to another person. It cuts that unhealthy tie. And so it's part of what I would call, a natural law, or sort of the unseen real. True universally, everywhere among all people, all times. Now you may say, oh, I don't believe in that kind of stuff. I only believe in stuff I can see. Well, I can prove it to you. That's not true. What happened? The pen fell to the ground. Why? Because gravity pulled it down, right? It's the unseen real. It's right there. We may watch the Super Bowl in a couple of days, and all of a sudden, the team that seemed like they could do nothing right suddenly gets new life, and the momentum shifts, and we can all see that, the effects of that, right? And you're like, well, show me where the momentum is. You're like, well, I can't show you that. I can just show you what the result is. So the same is going to be true as it relates to forgiveness. It is going to cut the unhealthy ties that bind. And so definitely, the thing you need to remember is that the path to healing goes through the gates of forgiveness. And again, this is not a religious thing. This is a true thing. Like people in California have studied this. So let me end with this story where I did this and the effect of it. So when I was a third-year med student, I started having pain in the bottoms of my feet and went to the doctor. Turned out it was tendinitis. Now they diagnosed me with plantar fasciitis. You know why? Because you can't charge very much if you're a doctor and you use regular words like tendinitis. So you say plantar fasciitis, and it's tendinitis in the bottoms of your feet. And so, I did physical therapy and ultrasound and injections. I even had these night casts made, these plaster night casts, so that I could sleep with my feet like this and try and stretch them out. All this kind of stuff, none of that worked. I ended up taking pain medicine 3 times a day, the stuff called Neurontin. You may have heard of that. You know, breakfast, lunch, and dinner. I took ibuprofen all day. I literally carried a narcotic pill in my pocket for rescue. And I'm going through med school, the last 2 years, lots of standing, being a pediatric resident. And this is the days before there was the, quote, 80-hour work week limit, right? As if that's like, yeah, if you just work twice what everyone else works, that's a cutback. So this is before that. I literally kept reusable ice packs in the freezer of the various floors where the kids would get admitted. So when I was working all night, I could take my shoes off and put my feet on it when I sat down to work on charts and things, right? That went on for 7 years. If you had said, Bill, I won the lottery, I'm taking a bunch of people to Europe, you know, for like a walking tour of the capitals, I'll pay for everything, do you want to go? No, I don't want to go. I'll be like in a coma by lunchtime. I can't do that, right? And I was assuming that's the way it was. So a friend of mine said, I got an idea, why don't you try this? He said, why don't you write down on a piece of paper all the things that you're worried about, all the things that you're stressed about. And while you're at it, why don't you write down all the people you're angry with or mad at? And I said, oh, I'm a good Southern little boy. I don't really get mad at people. He's like, okay, well, why don't you write down all the people you're frustrated with or annoyed by or whatever synonym you want, but write them all down. And the truth is, I wrote down pages of that. I went as far back as I could remember. I mean, I still remember when the guy in 4th grade threw me down and landed in a mud puddle, and I was very upset and ashamed. I still remember the guy who, you know, stole my girlfriend in 9th grade that I wanted to take to the dance, and he asked her first. I'm writing these people down, right? They have no idea. That's been more than 40 years. And every single day, basically, I said over them, okay, Chris, I forgive you for stealing my girlfriend in 9th grade. You owe me nothing. Okay, Eric, I forgive you for throwing me in a mud puddle. You owe me nothing. And I just worked through the whole list over and over, every day for about a month. And here's what happened. At the end of that month, the pain in my feet started going down and down and down. Within another month, I was off all medicine. That's all from just sort of letting go of all this stuff that was really eating me alive from the inside, right? The same might be true for some of you. Try it. The copay is low. It's not hard, right? It's not going to cost you much. So we're going to end, well, with that thought, who do you need to forgive? I encourage you to make a list. This is a doctor's prescription, right? You can't leave the office without a prescription from the doctor. So these are the things I want you to do. Think about what your true identity really is. What are the things that naturally sprout up out of just being you, all right? Define what being wealthy is. It is not how much money you have. I can tell you that right now. Determine what you have to be fit for. Have fun in ways that provide lots of restoration. Figure out who your 3 a.m. friends are. And then make a list of the people you need to forgive and do it. Try it. And then you'll have a life of ease.
This is Dr. Satterwhite. Thank you for listening to this presentation on well-being. I hope it will help you have a framework for living that more easily moves you into a place of ease. Please share the link with 5 of your friends and family members so that they too may know how to live a life of ease and well-being. See you next time.